Los Angeles, the City of Angels. From the Hollywood Walk of Fame to the Santa Monica Pier, Los Angeles shimmers with a captivating allure. Yet beneath this glittering facade lies a darker reality. This is the Los Angeles that tourists rarely see, the Los Angeles that exists beyond the carefully curated images of Hollywood. Here, in the neglected corners and forgotten neighborhoods, a different story unfolds. This is the story of Los Angeles' gangs. A complex and often brutal reality that has plagued the city for decades. It is a story that demands to be told. This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a journey into the darkest corners of Los Angeles, where violence is a constant threat and hope often flickers like a candle in the wind. Over the next few sections, we will embark on a journey to understand the intricate web of factors that have fueled gang culture in Los Angeles. We will explore the historical context, the social dynamics, and the individual stories that have shaped this complex and often tragic narrative. This is about understanding the human toll of gang violence, the communities torn apart, and the lives forever changed. It is about listening to the voices of those who have lived this reality, both those who have escaped its clutches and those who remain trapped within its grasp. Los Angeles in the early 20th century was a city on the cusp of greatness, a burgeoning metropolis fueled by the promise of opportunity and the allure of the silver screen. Migrants from across the nation, drawn by the prospect of a better life, flocked to the City of Angels, transforming its landscape from a sleepy pueblo into a sprawling urban center. The burgeoning film industry, with its dazzling lights and tales of overnight success, captured the imaginations of dreamers and strivers alike, further fueling the city's rapid expansion. But beneath the shimmering veneer of progress and prosperity, a darker reality was taking shape. The city's meteoric rise was not without its growing pains, and the influx of new residents, coupled with the pressures of rapid industrialization, created a volatile mix of social and economic tensions. As Los Angeles boomed, so too did its underbelly, where poverty, discrimination, and social unrest festered in the shadows of the city's gleaming skyscrapers and opulent movie palaces. The competition for jobs, housing, and resources intensified, exacerbating existing social divisions along racial and ethnic lines. The seeds of discontent were sown, setting the stage for the social unrest and gang violence that would plague Los Angeles for decades to come. The Great Migration, a mass exodus of African Americans from the Jim Crow South to northern and western cities, played a pivotal role in shaping the social landscape of Los Angeles and laying the groundwork for the emergence of its gang culture. Between 1910 and 1970, millions of Black Americans, fleeing the brutal realities of segregation, discrimination, and racial violence, sought refuge and opportunity in cities like Los Angeles, where the wartime industries promised jobs and the possibility of a better future. Lured by the promise of a life free from the shackles of Jim Crow, Black migrants arrived in Los Angeles with hopes and dreams in tow, only to find themselves confronted by a different, yet equally pervasive, form of racism. While the overt segregation of the South may have been absent, Los Angeles presented its own set of challenges, as Black residents encountered discriminatory housing practices, limited employment opportunities, and a pervasive climate of prejudice and hostility. Despite their contributions to the wartime workforce, Black workers were often relegated to low-paying menial jobs and denied access to the higher-paying positions and union protections enjoyed by their white counterparts. The social and economic disparities that characterize Black life in Los Angeles, fueled by systemic racism and the legacy of slavery, created a powder keg of tension and unrest, setting the stage for the social upheavals and the rise of gang culture that would come to define the city in the decades that followed. The year was 1969. Los Angeles, a city already grappling with racial tensions and socio-economic disparities, witnessed the birth of a force that would forever alter its landscape, the Crips. Formed in the heart of south-central Los Angeles, a neighborhood grappling with poverty, unemployment and police brutality, the Crips emerged as a response to the escalating violence and injustices faced by young black men. Founded by Raymond Washington and Stanley Tookie Williams, two charismatic teenagers determined to protect their community, the Crips initially positioned themselves as a force for self-defense, a brotherhood united against external threats. However, the Crips' initial intentions of self-preservation soon gave way to a more sinister and destructive path. As their numbers swelled, attracting disenfranchised youths eager for belonging and protection, the gang's focus shifted from defense to offense. They began to assert their dominance over rival groups, engaging in petty thefts, assaults, and increasingly violent confrontations. The Crips' reign of terror had begun, marking the start of a bloody chapter in Los Angeles' history. The emergence of the Crips, with their growing reputation for violence and intimidation, did not go unanswered. As the Crips tightened their grip on south-central Los Angeles, other neighborhoods and groups found themselves in the crosshairs. Faced with the threat of extortion, assault and territorial encroachment, a coalition of smaller gangs and independent crews banded together, forming a formidable opposition force, the Bloods. Born out of necessity and fueled by a shared animosity towards the Crips, the Bloods adopted red as their identifying color, a stark contrast to the Crips' blue. The rivalry between the Crips and the Bloods quickly escalated into a full-blown gang war, engulfing the streets of South Central in a cycle of violence and retaliation. Drive-by shootings, stabbings and brutal beatings became commonplace. The Crips and Bloods, locked in a deadly embrace, became synonymous with the escalating gang problem that plagued Los Angeles and other major cities across the United States. The streets of south-central Los Angeles became a canvas for the Crips and Bloods to mark their territory and assert their dominance. Graffiti, once a vibrant form of artistic expression, transformed into a menacing language of gang symbols and territorial demarcations. Walls, fences, and even freeway overpasses became battlegrounds for visual warfare. Each tag a defiant proclamation of allegiance and a challenge to rivals. The colours blue and red, once associated with innocence and patriotism, took on a sinister new meaning. Crips, draped in blue bandanas and sporting blue clothing, staked their claim to neighbourhoods like Willowbrook, Compton and Watts. Bloods, adorned in red, established their presence in areas like Inglewood, Carson and Long Beach. Turf wars, fueled by a toxic mix of pride, revenge and the pursuit of illicit profits, became a tragic hallmark of the Crips and Bloods rivalry. The cycle of violence seemed endless, each act of aggression begetting a more brutal response. The 1980s ushered in a new era of despair and destruction as crack cocaine, a cheap and highly addictive form of cocaine, flooded the streets of Los Angeles and other major cities across the United States. The crack epidemic, as it came to be known, had a devastating impact on already marginalized communities, exacerbating existing social problems and fueling a dramatic surge in gang violence. Crack cocaine, with its potent high and relatively low cost of production, proved to be a highly profitable commodity for gangs like the Crips and Bloods. The lure of quick riches and the promise of power drew countless young men into the drug trade, further fueling the cycle of violence and despair that gripped south-central Los Angeles. Turf wars, once fought over pride and reputation, now centered around control of drug corners and distribution routes. The stakes were higher than ever, and the violence became more brutal and indiscriminate. The streets, once filled with the laughter of children playing, became open-air drug markets where despair and death lurked around every corner. While the Crips and Bloods dominated the headlines and captured the public's imagination, another force was emerging in the gang landscape of Los Angeles Latino gangs. Fueled by many of the same socioeconomic factors that contributed to the rise of black gangs, Latino gangs carved out their own territories, established their own codes of conduct, and engaged in their own brutal rivalries. The influx of Latino immigrants to Los Angeles in the latter half of the 20th century, driven by political turmoil and economic hardship in their home countries, led to the formation of distinct ethnic enclaves. Within these communities, young people, often facing poverty, discrimination, and limited opportunities, sought solace and a sense of belonging in the camaraderie and protection offered by gangs. Latino gangs, while sharing some similarities with their black counterparts, also developed their own unique identities and organizational structures. Some, like the 18th Street Gang, adopted a hierarchical structure with established leadership and a strict code of conduct. The rise of Latino gangs added another layer of complexity to the already volatile gang landscape of Los Angeles. To understand the enduring grip of gang culture on the streets of Los Angeles, one must look beyond the headlines of violence and delve into the complex social dynamics that fuel its existence. For many young people growing up in marginalized communities where poverty, neglect, and violence are a daily reality, gangs offer a perverse sense of belonging, a surrogate family in a world that has often failed them. These neighborhoods, starved of resources and opportunity, become fertile recruiting grounds for gangs who prey on the vulnerabilities of young people desperate for acceptance, protection, and a sense of purpose. In the absence of strong family structures, positive role models, and viable pathways to success, gangs fill the void, offering a sense of camaraderie, loyalty, and shared struggle that many find irresistible. The allure of belonging is particularly strong for young people who have experienced trauma, abuse, or neglect. Once initiated, members are often pressured to prove their allegiance through acts of violence, perpetuating the cycle of brutality and despair. Gang culture, like any subculture, develops its own unique set of rituals, codes, and symbols, a language understood only by those initiated into its ranks. These rituals and codes serve multiple purposes. They reinforce group identity, enforce loyalty, and communicate threats and warnings to rivals. Hand signs, often flashed in a rapid-fire sequence, convey messages of allegiance, disrespect, or impending violence. Graffiti, sprayed on walls and buildings, marks territory, commemorates fallen comrades, and challenges rivals. The colors worn, the tattoos inked, and even the way members walk and talk all become part of a complex system of non-verbal communication. This language of loyalty and violence, while seemingly indecipherable to outsiders, is a powerful force within gang culture. It creates a sense of shared identity and purpose, reinforces the boundaries between us and them, and perpetuates the cycle of violence and retaliation. Those who break the code, whether intentionally or unintentionally, face swift and often brutal consequences. Snitching, for example, is considered the ultimate betrayal, punishable by death. This code of silence, enforced through fear and intimidation, makes it extremely difficult for law enforcement to infiltrate gangs or for witnesses to come forward, perpetuating the cycle of violence and impunity. In the world of gangs, tattoos are more than just body art. They are powerful symbols of allegiance, identity, and a life forever intertwined with the gang's narrative. These permanent markings, etched onto skin with needles and ink, tell a story, a visual chronicle of the wearer's journey through the ranks of the gang, their acts of violence, and their unwavering loyalty to the brotherhood. For many young people who join gangs, tattoos serve as a rite of passage, a tangible symbol of their commitment to the group. The act of getting inked, often done in clandestine settings with makeshift tools, is a painful and irreversible decision, signifying their willingness to endure suffering for the sake of belonging. The designs themselves often hold deep significance, reflecting the gang's history, beliefs, and rivalries. Numbers, letters, and symbols, often cryptic to outsiders, convey specific meanings within the gang's hierarchy and code of conduct. Portraits of fallen comrades, often rendered in painstaking detail, serve as grim reminders of the ever-present threat of violence and the ephemeral nature of life on the streets. Tattoos also serve as a form of intimidation, a visual warning to rivals of the wearer's allegiance and capacity for violence. The more elaborate and menacing the tattoos, the more fear and respect the wearer commands within the gang and on the streets. Graffiti, a ubiquitous presence on the walls and buildings of Los Angeles, serves as a visual manifestation of the city's gang culture, a constantly evolving tapestry of territorial demarcations, coded messages, and artistic expressions of rebellion and despair. What began as a form of street art, a way for marginalized communities to reclaim public spaces and express their creativity, has been co-opted by gangs who use graffiti to mark territory, communicate threats, and commemorate fallen comrades. Gang graffiti, often characterized by bold lettering, stylized calligraphy, and cryptic symbols, serves as a powerful form of nonverbal communication, understood only by those initiated into its code. Tags, often consisting of the gang's name or initials, are sprayed on walls, fences, and even freeway overpasses, marking the boundaries of their territory and serving as a visual warning to rivals. Murals, more elaborate and time-consuming to create, often depict scenes of violence, portraits of fallen comrades, or symbolic representations of the gang's history and beliefs. These murals, often created under the cover of darkness, serve as a source of pride and inspiration for gang members, reinforcing their sense of belonging and their willingness to die for the cause. The act of bombing or tagging rival territory is considered a highly disrespectful act, often provoking a swift and violent response. Graffiti, once a form of artistic expression, becomes a tool for intimidation, a visual manifestation of the ongoing turf wars that plague the streets of Los Angeles. Music, a powerful force that transcends language and cultural barriers, has long been intertwined with the gang culture of Los Angeles, providing a soundtrack for rebellion, despair, and the harsh realities of life and death on the streets. From the early days of funk and soul, which gave voice to the struggles of black and brown communities, to the emergence of gangster rap in the 1980s, which chronicled the realities of gang violence and the drug trade, music has served as both a mirror and a megaphone for the city's most marginalized voices. Gangster rap, in particular, emerged as a powerful force in shaping the narrative of gang culture, both within Los Angeles and beyond. Artists like NWA, Ice-T, and Dr. Dre, drawing on their own experiences growing up in South Central Los Angeles, gave voice to the anger, frustration, and despair that permeated their communities. Their lyrics, often graphic and unflinching in their depictions of violence, drug dealing, and police brutality, resonated with a generation of young people who felt unheard and unseen. The music became an anthem for rebellion, a way to reclaim power and agency in a world that seemed determined to keep them down. However, the rise of gangster rap also sparked controversy, with critics accusing the genre of glorifying violence, objectifying women, and fueling the very problems it claimed to expose. The debate over the influence of gangster rap on youth culture and its role in perpetuating the cycle of violence continues to this day. To fully comprehend the enduring grip of gang culture on the streets of Los Angeles, one must delve into the complex interplay of social, economic, and historical factors. The cycle of poverty, lack of opportunity, and systemic racism forms a tangled web, ensnaring generation after generation. Many gang members come from neighborhoods ravaged by poverty, where unemployment is rampant and educational opportunities are scarce. Growing up in these environments, where violence is a daily occurrence, can leave young people feeling hopeless and desperate for a way out. The lack of economic opportunity is often compounded by systemic racism, manifesting in discriminatory hiring practices and racial profiling. This institutionalized bias creates a sense of hopelessness and resentment, fueling the belief that the system is rigged against them. In the face of such adversity, gangs can seem like a viable alternative, offering a sense of belonging and economic opportunity through illicit activities. The allure of quick money and perceived respect can be difficult to resist for young people who see no other way out. The cycle of poverty and violence becomes a self-perpetuating machine, as each generation inherits the trauma and limited opportunities of the one before. Breaking this cycle requires addressing the root causes of poverty, inequality, and systemic racism, while providing young people with viable alternatives to gang life. The allure of belonging, protection, and even a perverse sense of purpose can blind young people to the harsh realities of gang life. The price of membership is often steep, measured in lost lives, shattered dreams, and futures stolen by violence, addiction, and incarceration. The streets of Los Angeles have witnessed countless tragedies as young lives are cut short by gang violence. Drive-by shootings, stabbings, and brutal beatings claim victims on a regular basis, leaving behind grieving families and communities traumatized by the senseless loss. Those who survive the violence often face a different kind of death, a slow, agonizing demise fueled by addiction to drugs and alcohol. Many gang members turn to substances as a way to cope with the trauma they have witnessed and the constant threat of violence that hangs over their heads. Addiction only deepens their despair, making it even harder to escape the clutches of gang life. Incarceration is another grim reality for many gang members. The criminal justice system, often ill-equipped to address the root causes of gang violence, traps young people in a revolving door of arrest, incarceration, and recidivism. Prison, instead of serving as a deterrent or a place for rehabilitation, often becomes a breeding ground for further criminal activity and gang recruitment. The price of gang membership is a heavy burden to bear, one that extends far beyond the individual and ripples through families, communities, and generations to come. Despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges, glimmers of hope shine through the darkness. Across Los Angeles, individuals and organizations are working tirelessly to break the cycle of gang violence and offer young people a path to a brighter future. Community-based organizations, often staffed by former gang members who understand the complexities of the issue firsthand, provide a lifeline to at-risk youth. These programs offer a range of services, including gang intervention, counseling, job training, and educational support. Mentorship programs connect at-risk youth with positive role models who can provide guidance, support, and a vision for a life beyond the streets. These mentors, often drawn from law enforcement, education, or the business community, offer a glimmer of hope and a belief in the potential of these young people. Arts and music programs provide creative outlets for expression, allowing young people to channel their energy and emotions into positive endeavors. These programs not only foster creativity, but also teach valuable life skills such as teamwork, discipline, and self-expression. Breaking the cycle of gang violence requires a sustained and multifaceted approach that addresses the root causes of poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity, while simultaneously providing young people with the support, resources and opportunities they need to thrive. It is a long and arduous journey, but one that is essential for the well-being of Los Angeles and its most vulnerable citizens. As gang violence escalated in the 1980s, fueled by the crack epidemic and the proliferation of firearms, law enforcement agencies across the United States, particularly in Los Angeles, responded with an iron fist. Operation Hammer, launched by the Los Angeles Police Department in 1987 under the leadership of Chief Daryl Gates, became synonymous with this aggressive approach to gang suppression. Conceived as a massive show of force aimed at dismantling gangs and restoring order to the city's streets, Operation Hammer involved large-scale sweeps of neighborhoods identified as gang hotspots. Thousands of officers, often armed with assault rifles and backed by helicopters, descended upon these communities, conducting warrantless searches, making mass arrests and confiscating weapons and drugs. While Operation Hammer resulted in a significant number of arrests and the seizure of illegal firearms and narcotics, its effectiveness in curbing gang violence remains a subject of debate. Critics argue that the operation's aggressive tactics, often characterized by racial profiling and excessive force, alienated communities, eroded trust in law enforcement, and did little to address the underlying social and economic conditions that fueled gang activity. The legacy of Operation Hammer is a complex and contested one, marked by both its perceived successes in reducing crime rates and its unintended consequences, which continue to reverberate through the streets of Los Angeles today. The operation's heavy-handed approach, while perhaps effective in the short term, ultimately failed to address the root causes of gang violence, leaving behind a legacy of mistrust and resentment that continues to hinder efforts to build bridges between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Section 2, Collateral Damage, the Erosion of Trust and the Rise of Mass Incarceration. Operation Hammer, while lauded by some for its tough-on-crime approach, had far-reaching consequences that extended far beyond its immediate impact on gang activity. The operation's aggressive tactics, often characterized by racial profiling and excessive force, left an indelible mark on the communities it targeted, eroding trust in law enforcement and contributing to the rise of mass incarceration, particularly among young men of color. The vast majority of those arrested during Operation Hammer were Black and Latino men, many of whom had no prior criminal records or involvement in gangs. These young men, often stopped and searched without probable cause, found themselves caught in the dragnet of a justice system that seemed more interested in punishment than rehabilitation. The mass arrests and prosecutions that characterized Operation Hammer contributed to the explosion of the prison population in California and across the United States. Young men, often charged with minor offenses, found themselves facing lengthy prison sentences under mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, which disproportionately impacted communities of color. The social and economic consequences of mass incarceration have been devastating, tearing families apart, depriving communities of vital human capital, and perpetuating cycles of poverty and despair. The erosion of trust in law enforcement, fueled by the heavy-handed tactics of operations like Operation Hammer, has created a climate of fear and suspicion, making it even more challenging to address the root causes of crime and build safer, more just communities. Section 3. Beyond Suppression, the Emergence of Community Policing and Gang Intervention. The limitations of purely suppressive approaches to gang violence, such as Operation Hammer, became increasingly apparent as the 1990s wore on. Law enforcement agencies, recognizing the need for more holistic and community-oriented strategies, began to explore alternatives to the iron fist, embracing the concepts of community policing and gang intervention. Community policing, a philosophy that emphasizes collaboration between law enforcement and the communities they serve, emerged as a counterpoint to the top-down, militaristic approach that had characterized previous efforts to combat gang violence. This new paradigm recognized that effective law enforcement required building trust, fostering relationships, and working together to address the underlying social and economic conditions that contributed to crime. Gang intervention programs, often led by former gang members who had turned their lives around, played a crucial role in this shift towards a more community-centered approach. These programs, recognizing that many gang members were themselves victims of violence and trauma, sought to provide counseling, job training and educational opportunities, offering a path out of the cycle of violence and despair. This shift in strategy, while gradual and uneven, marked a significant departure from the purely punitive approaches of the past. By engaging with communities, building trust and addressing the root causes of gang violence, law enforcement agencies began to recognize that lasting solutions required more than just arrests and incarceration. Section 4. A shift in strategy from punitive measures to restorative justice. As the 21st century dawned, a growing chorus of voices from academics and activists to law enforcement officials and policymakers began to advocate for a fundamental shift in the way society addressed crime and punishment. This shift, often referred to as restorative justice, seeks to move beyond the traditional adversarial model of the criminal justice system, which often focuses solely on punishment and retribution, towards a more holistic approach that emphasizes accountability, healing, and the repair of harm. Restorative justice, in the context of gang violence, recognizes that crime is not simply a violation of the law, but also a violation of human relationships and community trust. It seeks to bring together all parties affected by crime, victims, offenders, and community members, to engage in a dialogue aimed at understanding the impact of the crime, repairing the harm caused, and preventing future violence. This approach, often facilitated by trained mediators, provides a safe space for victims to share their stories, express their pain and anger, and seek restitution for their losses. It also allows offenders to take responsibility for their actions, understand the impact of their choices on others, and begin the process of making amends. Restorative justice, while not a panacea for the complex problem of gang violence, offers a promising alternative to the traditional punitive measures that have often proven ineffective and counterproductive. By focusing on accountability, healing, and the restoration of relationships, restorative justice seeks to break the cycle of violence and create a more just and equitable society. Section 5. The long road ahead, balancing enforcement with prevention and social change. Addressing gang violence in Los Angeles remains complex. Lasting solutions require balancing enforcement with prevention, intervention, and social change. Prevention efforts must start early, providing support and opportunities. This includes early education, after-school programs, job training, and mentorship. Intervention programs, often led by former gang members, offer counseling and job training. Social change requires addressing systemic inequalities like poverty and discrimination. Collaboration and sustained commitment are key to a safer Los Angeles. Section 1. Living in the shadow of fear. The daily toll of gang violence. For residents of communities plagued by gang activity, life is a constant negotiation with fear. The menacing presence of gangs casts a long shadow over everyday activities, transforming once familiar streets and parks into potential battlegrounds. The fear is insidious, seeping into the fabric of daily routines, shaping decisions and eroding the sense of peace and security that every individual deserves. The sound of gunshots, a chilling symphony of urban warfare, becomes a grimly familiar soundtrack. Parents, their hearts pounding with each burst of gunfire, rush to shelter their children, their minds racing with worry. Schools, once sanctuaries of learning and growth, transform into fortresses, their gates locked tight, their hallways patrolled by security guards. The simple act of walking to the store, attending a school event, or visiting a friend's house becomes fraught with anxiety, a calculated risk in a landscape where danger lurks around every corner. The fear is not limited to physical violence. The threat of intimidation, extortion, and retaliation hangs heavy in the air, creating an atmosphere of silence and complicity. Residents, fearful of becoming targets themselves, often hesitate to report crimes or cooperate with law enforcement, perpetuating a cycle of silence that allows gangs to operate with impunity. The very fabric of community, trust, solidarity, and a shared sense of responsibility is frayed by fear, leaving residents feeling isolated, vulnerable, and deeply distrustful of those around them. including the authorities tasked with protecting them. Section 2. Beyond the headlines, the human cost of gang warfare. The headlines scream of drive-by shootings, drug busts and gang rivalries, painting a grim picture of violence and despair. But behind the sensationalized accounts and grim statistics lie the deeply personal stories of individuals whose lives have been irrevocably altered by the scourge of gang violence. These are the stories that rarely make the evening news, the stories of shattered families, lost potential, and the enduring legacy of trauma that reverberates through generations. Consider the mother whose son, once a bright and promising student, was lured into a gang at a young age, his dreams swallowed whole by the allure of belonging and the false promise of power. She mourns the son she lost, not just to the streets but to the choices that led him down a path of violence and destruction. Or picture the young woman, her life forever altered by a stray bullet that pierced through her living room window, leaving her paralyzed and grappling with the physical and emotional scars of a senseless act of violence. For every life lost to gang violence, countless others are irrevocably changed. Parents live with the constant fear of losing their children to the streets, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they cannot shield them from the dangers that lurk just beyond their doorstep. Siblings grapple with the loss of their companions, their childhoods cut short by the harsh realities of gang life. And communities, their spirits broken by the seemingly endless cycle of violence, struggle to heal and rebuild. The impact of gang violence extends far beyond the immediate casualties, leaving a trail of economic devastation in its wake. Businesses, wary of crime and the threat of violence, shutter their doors, depriving communities of vital jobs and services. Property values plummet, trapping residents in a cycle of poverty and despair. The very foundations of economic opportunity crumble, leaving behind a landscape of boarded-up storefronts, vacant lots, and shattered dreams. Investment, the lifeblood of economic growth, dries up as businesses, both large and small, shy away from areas perceived as dangerous and unprofitable. The lack of investment perpetuates a vicious cycle of decline as residents struggle to access basic goods and services, and the tax base erodes, further diminishing the capacity of local governments to address the underlying social and economic problems that contribute to gang activity. For residents of gang-affected communities, the lack of economic opportunity is not merely an abstract concept. It is a daily reality that shapes their lives in profound ways. Young people, their options limited by failing schools and a dearth of job prospects, face a stark choice: succumb to the allure of the streets or struggle to make ends meet in an environment where the odds are stacked against them. The American dream, that tantalizing promise of upward mobility and a better life, seems like an impossible fantasy, a distant beacon of hope in a sea of despair. The violence that plagues gang-affected communities leaves an enduring legacy of trauma, its invisible scars etched deep within the psyches of residents, particularly children. Exposure to violence, whether directly as a victim or indirectly as a witness, can have profound and long-lasting consequences, shaping the way children view the world, their relationships with others, and their own sense of self-worth. Children who grow up surrounded by violence often exhibit a range of behavioral, emotional, and cognitive difficulties. They may struggle to concentrate in school, exhibit aggressive or withdrawn behavior, suffer from anxiety and depression, and experience nightmares and flashbacks. The trauma they have witnessed can manifest in a variety of ways, often mimicking the very violence that they have been exposed to. The cycle of trauma, like the cycle of poverty and violence, is a self-perpetuating machine as each generation passes on its pain and unhealed wounds to the next. Children who grow up witnessing violence are more likely to engage in violence themselves, perpetuating a cycle of aggression and despair. Breaking this cycle requires a multi-pronged approach that addresses the root causes of trauma, provides access to mental health services, and creates safe and nurturing environments where children can heal and thrive. Despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges they face, communities ravaged by gang violence demonstrate remarkable resilience. Amidst the ruins, seeds of hope take root, nourished by the unwavering commitment of residents who refuse to surrender to despair. They understand that true change must come from within, from the collective efforts of those who call these neighborhoods home. Community activists, many of whom have lost loved ones to gang violence or have themselves escaped the grip of gangs, emerge as powerful voices for change. They organize peace marches, lead anti-gang initiatives, and work tirelessly to provide young people with alternatives to the streets. Their courage and determination serve as an inspiration, reminding others that even in the darkest of times, hope endures. Grassroots organizations, often operating on shoestring budgets and fueled by the passion of volunteers, provide vital services to those most in need. They offer after-school programs, job training, counseling and mentorship opportunities, creating safe havens where young people can escape the allure of the streets and envision a brighter future. These organizations, deeply embedded in the communities they serve, understand the nuances of gang culture and the unique challenges faced by those caught in its web. Section 6. The role of education empowering youth, transforming lives. Education, the great equalizer, plays a pivotal role in breaking the cycle of gang violence and creating a more just and equitable society. For young people trapped in the throes of poverty, discrimination and limited opportunities, education offers a beacon of hope, a pathway to a brighter future. By investing in education, we invest in the future of our communities and empower young people to reach their full potential. Schools in gang-affected communities face unique challenges, from high rates of poverty and student mobility to a lack of resources and the constant threat of violence. Yet despite these obstacles, dedicated educators work tirelessly to create nurturing and supportive learning environments where students can thrive. They understand that education is not merely about imparting knowledge, it is about empowering young people to believe in themselves, to dream big, and to envision a future where they are architects of their own destinies. Beyond the traditional classroom setting, after-school programs, mentoring initiatives, and college access programs provide vital support, helping young people navigate the often daunting path to higher education. These programs recognize that education is not a one-size-fits-all endeavor, and that many students, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, require additional support to overcome the obstacles they face. Section 7. Faith in action, churches and community organizations as beacons of hope. In the heart of communities grappling with gang violence, faith-based organizations, particularly churches, often serve as beacons of hope, providing solace, support, and a sense of moral compass in a world often defined by chaos and despair. These institutions, deeply rooted in the communities they serve, offer more than just spiritual guidance. They provide a range of social services, from food banks and clothing drives to after-school programs and job training initiatives. Churches, often led by pastors who have witnessed firsthand the devastating impact of gang violence, understand the complex interplay of social, economic and spiritual factors that contribute to this crisis. They offer a message of redemption, forgiveness and the transformative power of faith to heal wounds, bridge divides and inspire hope in even the most desperate of circumstances. Community centers, often affiliated with churches or other faith-based organizations, provide safe havens for young people, offering a range of recreational activities, educational programs and mentorship opportunities. These centers, staffed by caring adults who serve as positive role models, provide a sense of belonging, purpose and structure that many young people lack in their lives. Section 8. The Long Road to Healing. Building a Brighter Future for Los Angeles. The task of dismantling the entrenched gang culture that has plagued Los Angeles for decades is a daunting one, requiring a sustained and multifaceted approach that addresses the root causes of violence, heals the wounds of trauma, and empowers communities to reclaim their streets and their futures. It is a long and arduous journey, but one that is essential for the well-being of the city and its most vulnerable citizens. Law enforcement, while playing a crucial role in maintaining public safety and holding offenders accountable, cannot do it alone. True and lasting change requires a collective effort, a commitment from all segments of society to invest in prevention, intervention, and social change. This includes addressing the systemic inequalities that perpetuate poverty, discrimination, and lack of opportunity, providing young people with viable alternatives to gang involvement, and supporting the individuals and organizations working tirelessly to make a difference on the ground. The road to healing is paved with compassion, understanding, and a willingness to listen to the voices of those most affected by gang violence. It requires a belief in the transformative power of education, the strength of community, and the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to surrender to despair. By working together, we can create a Los Angeles where all residents, regardless of zip code or background, have the opportunity to live in peace, pursue their dreams, and reach their full potential. The digital revolution has transformed nearly every facet of modern life, including the shadowy underworld of gangs. Social media platforms have become powerful tools for gangs, providing new avenues for recruitment and communication. The streets have expanded to include the virtual realm, where anonymity and internet reach amplify their influence. Gangs leverage social media to cast a wider net, targeting vulnerable youth far beyond their neighborhoods. They project an image of power and wealth, masking the brutal realities beneath. This makes it challenging for law enforcement to track and dismantle their networks. The constant online threats and glorification of gang life desensitize youth to the real-world consequences of gang involvement. Social media, with its curated feeds, has created a culture obsessed with image and instant gratification. For young people in poverty, the allure of gang life online can be irresistible. Gangs flaunt luxury cars, cash, and designer clothing, creating an illusion of success to entice youth. The anonymity of the internet allows gang members to create online personas, masking their criminal activities. Online recruitment often begins subtly, with seemingly harmless interactions on social media platforms. The rise of globalization has had a profound impact on organized crime, facilitating the growth of transnational gangs, criminal organizations that operate across national borders, exploiting the interconnectedness of the globalized world. These gangs often have roots in civil wars or economic deprivation, evolving into sophisticated criminal enterprises engaging in a wide range of illicit activities. Los Angeles, with its bustling port and diverse population, has become a hub for transnational gang activity. These gangs pose a significant challenge to law enforcement as their operations span multiple jurisdictions. The globalization of crime has blurred traditional boundaries, making it more difficult to combat these networks. International cooperation is essential to disrupt these gangs' operations. Homeboy Industries and the power of second chances. Amidst the despair and violence, glimmers of hope emerge from unexpected corners. Homeboy Industries offers a powerful testament to the transformative power of compassion and second chances. Founded in 1988 by Father Greg Boyle, Homeboy Industries provides a lifeline to former gang members. The motto, "Nothing stops a bullet like a job," encapsulates its core philosophy. Homeboy Industries' approach is rooted in the belief in the inherent dignity of every individual. The organization provides a supportive environment for healing, job skills, and education. Social enterprises offer on-the-job training and employment opportunities. Success stories are a testament to the power of second chances, lives transformed by compassion and support. Their journeys inspire others to build brighter futures. A new generation of peacemakers interrupting the cycle of violence. Organizations like Homeboy Industries offer hope and healing to those seeking to escape gangs. A new generation of peacemakers is working tirelessly to prevent violence before it occurs. They interrupt the cycle of retaliation and despair that has plagued Los Angeles for decades. These individuals, often former gang members themselves, understand the complexities of gang culture. They work on multiple fronts, mediating conflicts and providing mentorship to at-risk youth. They advocate for systemic change, building relationships with gang members and community residents. They understand that true peace requires addressing the root causes of violence. They foster a sense of hope and possibility in communities that have long been starved of both. These peacemakers are on the front lines of a movement to transform Los Angeles from within. They are planting seeds of hope, nurturing a vision of a future where young people choose dialogue over bullets, where communities come together to heal and rebuild, and where the streets of Los Angeles are no longer defined by fear and despair. Section 1. The enduring shadow of the City of Angels. Los Angeles, a city of dreams, a beacon of hope, a land of opportunity. Yet, as we've journeyed through its underbelly, we've confronted a stark reality, a shadow cast by the pervasive presence of gangs. Their grip on the city's soul, while perhaps less visible than the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, is no less real, its consequences reverberating through generations. We've seen how historical injustices, economic disparities, and the enduring legacy of racism have created fertile ground for gangs to flourish, preying on the vulnerabilities of those marginalized and forgotten. From the early days of the Crips and Bloods, their rivalry etched in the very streets of South Central, to the emergence of Latino and Asian gangs, each vying for power and control, the cycle of violence has left an indelible mark. We've witnessed the devastating impact on communities, the fear that stalks everyday life, the economic devastation that cripples neighborhoods, and the cycle of trauma that ensnares generation after generation. The stories we've explored, though often heartbreaking, are not merely tales of despair. They are testaments to the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering determination of individuals and communities to overcome adversity and build a brighter future. We've seen how former gang members, their lives transformed by compassion and second chances, have become agents of change, working to interrupt the cycle of violence and guide others towards a path of healing and redemption. Section 2. A legacy etched in pain, resilience, and hope. The legacy of gangs in Los Angeles is a complex and multifaceted one, a tapestry woven from threads of pain, resilience, and hope. It is a story that defies easy answers or quick fixes, demanding a nuanced understanding of the historical, social, and economic forces that have shaped the city's landscape. It is a story that challenges us to confront our own biases, to acknowledge the systemic injustices that perpetuate inequality, and to recognize the humanity of all those caught in the crossfire. As we've delved into the heart of this issue, we've encountered individuals who have dedicated their lives to breaking the cycle of gang violence. Teachers, social workers, community activists, and faith leaders, their compassion fueled by a deep and abiding belief in the potential of every human being, work tirelessly to provide young people with alternatives to the streets. They offer mentorship, education, job training, and a sense of hope, reminding us that even in the darkest of corners, the light of human kindness can shine through. We've witnessed the transformative power of programs like Homeboy Industries, where former gang members, their lives once defined by violence and despair, find healing, purpose, and the opportunity to rebuild their lives. We've seen how community policing initiatives rooted in collaboration and understanding can bridge the divide between law enforcement and the communities they serve, fostering trust and creating safer neighborhoods. Section 3. Towards a brighter dawn, breaking the cycle one life at a time. The journey towards a Los Angeles free from the grip of gang violence is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires sustained effort, long-term investment, and a willingness to address the root causes of this complex issue. Punitive measures alone, while perhaps offering a temporary respite, have proven ineffective in breaking the cycle of violence. True and lasting change demands a multifaceted approach, one that combines law enforcement with prevention, intervention, and social justice. We must invest in our children, providing them with access to quality education, healthcare, and safe and nurturing environments where they can thrive. We must create economic opportunities in underserved communities, breaking down the barriers of poverty and discrimination that often push young people towards gangs. And we must address the trauma that fuels the cycle of violence, providing access to mental health services and support systems that empower individuals and families to heal. The task may seem daunting, the challenges immense, but the stories we've shared remind us that change is possible, one life at a time. Every young person reached, every act of violence prevented, every life transformed by compassion and opportunity represents a step towards a brighter future. The fight against gang violence is not just a fight for safer streets, it is a fight for the very soul of Los Angeles, a fight to reclaim the promise of hope, opportunity, and a better life for all.